I'm Hemant Mehta, and you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. You can now listen to all of our episodes and see show notes at FriendlyAtheistPodcast.com. I am here with Jason Heap. Jason is the executive director of the United Coalition of Reason, which has put up a lot of billboards all across the country. And he's also a humanist chaplain who's done a lot of work in that area. We'll talk about that soon. So, Jason, thanks for being with me.
I appreciate your time today.
Sure. So let's talk about United Core. How many states have you all put billboards up in at this point?
It wouldn't be easy to say about the states. I would actually say about the number of coalitions that we've...
How many coalitions have you formed now?
At the moment, we've got nearly 80.
80 coalitions, and these are local humanist groups, atheist groups working together as a coalition to... What are their purposes? I mean, I know what the purpose of the Chicago one is because I've worked with that one, but what do you see as the purpose of these coalitions?
Well, when it first started in 2009 in Philadelphia, it moved from that... idea of just being visibility, where to say, hello, I'm an atheist, I'm here, or I'm an agnostic or a skeptic or a free thinker, I'm here. But over time, though, since 2009, it's moved into 80 coalitions across the country, and there's about 2 or 3 that are currently in the pipeline. Some of them are wanting to do more than just visibility. A lot of them are trying to become more politically active, where they realize that within their group, they're able to have more ability to push for sort of governmental issues that they find to be important. But at the same time, I also have a lot of other groups that are interested in social work. And so when they realize that they have the ability to combine forces with other like-minded people, or even sometimes reach into the theistic communities who have said, hey, you're the first time that I've seen someone who professes non-belief in a deity, but you're out here today with me at the blood bank, or you're out here with me trying to collect clothing for children. I thought you were immoral.
Right. No, actually, so you're destroying those stereotypes real quick.
Oh, and I love that. I mean, it's a pleasant thing when I get an email from a coalition and they just say, you'll never believe this. We outnumbered the churches that showed up today. And then on top of that, they've invited us to come into the church and say, tell us about your sense of ethics as to why you believe this particular way. So then all of a sudden it is moving from visibility to more of a community cohesion to say, you know, let's actually have this conversation that we weren't having in the past when you just saw me as being an enemy or a communist.
Right. It seems like a lot of these coalitions are doing all the good things that a lot of these churches are doing, minus all the supernatural stuff in a lot of ways. They're doing the charity work. They're doing the volunteer work. They're doing the community aspect of church as well.
Oh, certainly. And there was one time I had a person say to me, we had this church that sent us a really nasty email and said, you know, we can't believe that you atheists have done X, Y, and Z, and how could you have done something like this? And they said to me, Jace, what do we say in response to them? And I said to them, why don't you tell them that, you know, the Bible says in the Christian New Testament, Jesus was supposedly said to somebody, anytime you do this to the least of these, you do to me. Well, there's a lot of least of these out there that some of our theistic communities are overlooking. And if somebody doesn't do something about it, then who's going to actually reach out and provide some sort of social justice? And so in that way, the non-theistic community was actually raising social visibility of people that had just been overlooked by the local churches. And I found that very heartening.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that I often hear about with the United Core billboards, what are some of the messages you guys have used?
I think the first one that came out was actually borrowed from Free Thought Action, and it said, don't believe in a God, you're not alone. And then there's also been, don't believe in a God, join the club. And then there has been, godless, so are we. And that one was unveiled in Iowa, and I've heard some combine harvester stories that have come out from that one.
What's amazing is none of these are aggressive to me. None of them are antagonistic. They're just kind of saying, hey, we're just like you. And a lot of you agree with us, so don't forget that we're here too. As opposed to, say, something like American Atheists, which is very much like it's a myth. You know, very much in your face. They are definitely trying to get media attention with them. But with the United Core billboards, what I find interesting about them is these seem pretty innocuous. No one should really get offended by anyone saying, don't believe in a God? So do we. Smiley face. You know what I mean?
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yeah, kind of and thing. Yet there have been, I guess, as much controversy about those billboards as any of the other ones that I've seen. I think even in Iowa, like the governor got involved trying to get them off of buses. I don't know if that was United Core or not, but it just harmless messages that get people worked up. Have you seen any just crazy reactions to any of these?
Well, I mean, probably the most vehement action we had from one particular person was on the television. And it was a lady who was just absolutely ranting about it and just saying, my God died so that you could have this right to have this billboard in a country that is Christian. And of course you get that and you think, okay, fine. You know, we can always ignore that one.
Right.
The one that still sticks in my mind was recently we had done a big purchase of billboards from the Gulf Coast region, from Pensacola, Florida, out to Biloxi, Mississippi. And from one thing after another, it was stalled or delayed or whatever else. And it was not the billboard company's general management that was slowing it down, but it was actually the local area. And all that did was...
They were fighting back against it?
They were fighting back against it because apparently from one of the local press, it had said that fundamentalist Christian groups got the billboard to come down early. Now, all that has done is it told me, you know, people are giving into a political pressure. And when I've said to people that, you know, after the civil rights of the 60s and as it kind of played out through the 70s and 80s, probably one of the few remaining groups that are still in the crosshairs of a certain cross-section of society are people that do not profess a belief in a deity. And that was unequivocal. We see them actually saying, yes, we were proud to have this thing taken down and we pressured a local, you know, business, but this is also a local business that's generating revenue and tax money and something else that's also happy to run some fairly graphic abortion.
There's definitely a double standard going on in some cases.
Indeed. And so all we were actually saying to them was, look, we don't want to have a fuss. All we want is what's contractually obligated because, as you said, it's an innocuous message and it wasn't poking a finger in somebody's eye. No one was slating one religion over another or saying, you know, you need to deconvert.
Why do you think people are, some people are so up in arms about some of these billboards? Do you think they're just offended by atheists existing? Is it the fact that they're asserting themselves in their community? Because it's not like these billboards are saying, you know, we want Christians out of here, where there might have a legit reason to push back. What is it that they're upset about, do you think?
Oh, I would actually say that they don't like the idea of visibility. I recommend looking at one Fox News story that...
No, thanks.
Actually, I know, I have other things to do on the weekend as well, like rearranging my sock drawer. But
yeah.
But they actually did say one time, you know, I think it was Kimberly Guilfoyle, I don't know. Don't seem to find her outside of the U.S., but she was actually saying, you know, if these atheists don't like thus and so, get out. Leave. And you just sort of think, hold on, wait a minute. You know, Roger Williams in the 1640s when writing The Bloody Tent of Persecution saying...
Yeah, go back to your own country. We live here.
Exactly.
Like, where are we going?
So it just seemed a bit, you know, banal that it would come to that extent of saying, you don't even have a right to live here. But there are some people that... I don't know, I do sympathize with them because I grew up in an evangelical family where we were told, you know, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God but through me. And if that's what has been ingrained in your mindset, anyone that does not fit that category, even if they can be another Christian, like a Roman Catholic or an evangelical Lutheran or a Missouri Synod, if they say, but I disagree with that theology, great, you're going to hell too with everybody else. And that kind of polarization, I just don't sense that in other parts of the world that I've lived and worked. But I come back here in August and then whang, here it is again. And you think, come on, people, don't push me away from the discussion table just because I have a slight disagreement with you.
Right. So what is your role now? You're the new executive director of United Coalition of Reason. What does that position entail for you?
Well, a lot of that now is changing the direction of what United Core is going to be doing. In the past, it used to be predominantly some media training on how to work with media when they come to your door and a billboard's being erected and saying, look, we're non-believers and we're here. Ta-da! Okay, well, that's phenomenal. We can deal with that one. But what we've also begun to discover now is that because the United Core has grown to nearly 700 cooperating groups, bearing in mind it was one core of five groups, and now it's 80 and nearly 700, These folks are saying, all right, now that we're established, how can we increase what we're doing? We're not interested in visibility.
Right. You're not going to be putting up more billboards in all of these cities, really. You're trying to take the coalitions that are already there and do more with them.
That's correct. I mean, we do have some cores that are in the process of building, and we're going to repeat the same sort of thing with some other kind of visibility campaign. But what we're interested in doing is trying to cultivate and nurture those that are already there. I mean, in Chicago, I know at the moment you have, for the National Week of Action, you have a blood bank. And you have a blood bank card with your account on it, and you're encouraging people anywhere from Chicagoland Atheist to Freedom from Religion chapter to Chol Hadesh to say, let's all contribute to this because now we all benefit from the good work that we have done. There are other groups across this country that need to hear that kind of thing from you to say, well,
that we're doing this, you should give this a try as well.
There you go.
Spread good ideas.
And it is about the same sort of thing that I was doing as a school headmaster. If you find best practice, you then share that with other people. So it's called the professional learning communities. You'll find the Dufour family that wrote loads of this stuff on their stuff. Well, there it is. So if you've got an idea that's working, we could probably share that with, say, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they would say, well, we'll adapt that a little bit, but thank you very much, Chicago, for this general idea that you have given us that we can now roll out here.
So let me go back, not to totally change the subject, because your background is really fascinating. You've lived in a whole bunch of different places. You've been a headmaster of schools. So walk me through. You said you were raised in an evangelical household?
Yes, that's correct.
How did you leave that? Let's start there.
It was when I think I was in about middle of high school that I began to really question a few things because there had been a lot of tragedies within my life, and the kind of answers that I usually got was sort of like, well, let's pray about this one, or you know what the Bible says about this, and and one day we will see them rise, but that wasn't really addressing my grief, and those sort of answers didn't work for me. And then when I went to university, and I'll tell you where it was. I mean, Howard Payne University in Brownwood, Texas. This is a Baptist General Convention of Texas University. The instructors that I had in the theology and philosophy department were mostly reverend doctors, but they encouraged you to think for yourself and to come up with your own solution to what you studied, but to ground that in real scholarship. So that in itself began to make me rethink a lot of what kind of dogma I had grown up with.
Did they know that might happen if they asked you guys to question stuff?
Well, they wanted you to because they introduced this concept to us of saying, there's two kinds of faith. There's either the faith of an intellectual assent that you say, yes, I agree with that because I like that. Or, in the terms of like Martin Luther, he would say, is faith something that you would invest your entirety into? Well, for me, it was predominantly the former, and I began to realize, no. So as I began to start to read philosophy more, the more I began to also study history and textual criticism, I just thought, no, I cannot maintain this way of thinking from before. And then by the time I went off to graduate school at Bright Divinity School, who, by the way, still has not turned their back on me. I mean, Howard Payne doesn't want anything to do with me, but Bright's cool. These guys were actually saying, there are other faiths in this world that call God, God. And at that moment, I began to realize, well, in some ways, we make God out for who we think God should be. And so, therefore, God is in my image rather than the other way around. And studying alongside...
We created God in our image.
That's true. I mean, that's Adolf von Harnack. If you're looking at his book in the 1800s, Was ist Christentums, I can summarize it for you in one thing. It is who we think he is. And so at Bright, they were talking about gender-inclusive language. It was talking about, not the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. And
were you warned about going to this school before you went there?
Are you kidding? They gave me a full tuition grant.
As in, were people at your college that you're saying was very Christian, when you said, I'm going to this place for my master's, did they say, well, you're going to... Because I think I've heard Bart Ehrman, the New Testament scholar, who's written about Jesus and things like that. He said, I went to a very religious school, but when I went to another religious school for graduate school, they're all like, oh, you're going to lose your faith now. And then we went to pursue his doctorate at Yale, that they were like, oh, well, you're going to lose your religion now. And it's like, no, you're getting more educated in this stuff. But if you're going to a school that's not as fundamentalist as the one before it, they're all like, oh, well, that's a mistake.
Actually, no, because they already knew that I was having very agnostic beliefs.
So it seemed
open.
to fit you.
Well, it did, because it was either Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth or someplace else nearby. And when Bright said, we want to give you this full tuition grant, come and learn from us, and then also put into it, because Bright valued diversity. And we actually had the first openly gay ordained Southern Baptist minister that taught the first ever gay and lesbian theology class. And I ate that up and thought to myself, goodbye, all this other stuff that I had, the baggage. I just jettisoned it because I thought, this is nonsense. There's more to life than fighting over this. And so as I began to go to Bright, people back at Howard Payne said, are you really enjoying it? Yes, we knew that you would, because, there was always this sort of joke of I was sinking deep in sin, having a real good time. And that was the hymn that we joked about. And but it was a place that I flourished, because I realized, no, there's much more to it than just what's right in front of you. And,
what'd you get your master's in?
Well, which one?
Which ones do you have?
Well, I have a Master of Divinity from Bright, and I went off to the University of Oxford and did a Master's in History and Theology. So by that time, if there was any faith to be had, the more that you study history, well, goodbye to that.
Right.
And did postgraduate studies in religious education to be able to teach religion and philosophy and history and even psychology and sociology in the British state school system before becoming a headmaster. And with each one of these things, each system also confirmed the idea of, can you prove X, Y, and Z? If you can't, then you need to go back and either throw it out or rethink it and defend that. So,
did you enjoy your time as a headmaster? I'm not sure what the differences are between a headmaster at a British school and like a principal at a U.S. one. But did you enjoy that position when you were in it?
Oh, thoroughly, because, no, first of all, I'm not a Dumbledore. I don't wear hats. I mean, my hair is spiky enough as it... But the headmaster in a British school has changed over the years, but it still requires you to do some sort of teaching and to be able, again, to share best practice for people to look at you and say, can you still do the job in the classroom? Which I've discovered in the States, predominantly a building principal is an administrator. They don't have much teaching load, if at all.
Yeah, they don't. I know at the schools that I worked at or the schools I knew about, the principal never taught any classes.
There you are. And most of my time, again, was in the Middle East that I was teaching. And
what were you doing there?
As headmaster of a school. And
so this was what? Like you were in which country?
Kuwait. I've worked in Kuwait and Nigeria, China, as well as Qatar. And in each one of those, the culture, of course, you had to be accustomed to.
Are these all English language schools, or was it just whatever the nation happened to be their language? And
well, they were bilingual. And,
okay.
You've mentioned about the International Baccalaureate. This was actually something called the International General Certificate of Secondary Education, which is the British version, and it's far more intense in some respects than the IB, and the IB has its own different learning outcomes. But working in the Middle East, face to face with politics and religion and fanaticism and petrochemical wealth and corruption and all of these things, that it was just surreal. But at the same time, it forced me to think in terms of who are my community partners, so that I have to be able to work at the same time with Christians and Sikhs and Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and Hindus and non-believers in order to achieve this particular goal. So if I was a headmaster who was a Christian, if I was a headmaster who was a non-believer, they didn't care. It was about, can you get this job done?
Right. Now, have you learned anything from your teaching headmaster days that you apply to the United Core groups?
Very much so. Capacity building is people first. That is my maxim. Put people first. Put their interest ahead of mine. And again, this idea of collective learning, collective work, where the leader, whoever's facilitating this, sees themselves as being incomplete, to where I need people more than I would assume that they need me. And again, the whole idea of diplomacy is massive, because the cultures mix and sometimes clash in this region. I mean, just look at what's on the news now.
Right.
So it taught me a lot about how to relate to people at their particular level. So learning about their context is important. So how I would relate to you in Chicago is quite different to how I'd relate to somebody in, say, Chico, California, or Richmond, Virginia, or Houston, Texas. There's still an ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve, but I have to be able to respect and work with the confines and the difficulties, as well as the things that you just find so easy.
So how did you get from doing the headmaster work to this billboard organization? Like, what led to that transition? How did you get connected with the United Corps folks?
It was after I applied to the Navy chaplaincy in the military, and had determined not to take certain jobs whilst I was waiting for that. I mean, I had been offered other jobs as a principal of schools. And so in the process of that, the position came available with the United Coalition of Reason in August as its national coordinator. At the time, it was based at the American Humanist Association, but again, it still had good relations with many, many other non-theistic groups. Again, think about how to work with different people back.
So gave you that opportunity still.
There it is. So when we became completely independent in March, then, there we have it. So it was just a matter of promoting to a different position, but also then the job itself remained fairly similar, with the exception of setting a new direction and then also providing the framework that will allow for that kind of overlap and mutual nurturing.
So let me ask you about the chaplaincy stuff. You are a humanist chaplain. There are others out there who hold that title as well. And the criticism I often hear is, why are you bothering to be a chaplain? That is a religious thing. Why do we need humanist chaplains?
Well, it's only a religious thing if we look at, if we refuse to accept the fact that language evolves just like people do. I mean, we don't...
So what does a chaplain mean?
Well, a chaplain traditionally had something to do with a person who was, ministering to a chapel. But that was also under medieval Europe, and historically, that time of mixing government and religion wasn't the finest hour of Europe. And let's just summarize a 5-tome book on that one. But over time, then a chaplain also began to be seen as a religious minister who is attached to an institution for certain roles and things like that. But also, I mean, because the Humanist Society, who is my endorser, they are recognized as having that kind of, for lack of better terms, ministerial role. Because they endorse, they also, check up on people to make sure that it is a good representation of humanistic views and values. So as a military chaplain, or just as a chaplain in hospitals, I am there to make sure that I serve everybody equally, that I also inform other people who don't hold my particular view of how to best use, my information and my knowledge and experience so that they can do the same thing with others. And then at the same time, there's in institutional chaplaincy work, there's a phrase that I love, which is either perform it or provide it. Now, if it's something that I cannot do, so again, let's just say someone is dying and they want extreme unction and they want to see a priest.
You can't do that.
I can't do that. And also, you can't ask a Muslim to do that, or you can't ask a Jew to do that, because that's of that particular tradition. But you then use the network back again to some of the transferable skills around the education life. You find somebody who is able to do that. Likewise, I would hope that anybody else who sees themselves as a professional pastoral caregiver would say, hey, I'm dealing with somebody here who's an agnostic. They really don't want me to pray for them, but what can I do that would offer them authentic pastoral care and relieve them and help them in this time of need? Because obviously what I'm trying to offer them isn't the case. I mean, again, doctors don't give people injections of medication that they know is not what they need. It should be about the same thing with pastoral care and chaplaincy.
So why is there so much resistance against this idea? Because in the military, we've seen it where they seem to say, we don't want any non-religious chaplains. What are they worried is going to happen? Do people think you're going to proselytize atheism in that role? Or are they just saying, you know what, we like it the way it is? Like, I guess I don't understand the mindset of politicians and conservatives in general who say it's perfectly fine to have a Muslim chaplain or a Hindu chaplain, but they draw the line at a humanist one. What are they afraid of happening?
I really don't know, because that's also the same question that I ask whenever I speak with chaplains. I mean, I know some chaplains who are Unitarian Universalists who also do not openly profess a belief in a deity.
But they're fine. They can be a chaplain.
And that's why I scratch my head and ask the same question. Is it a matter of being afraid of something? Is there something that they are trying to protect? Are they pressured by people? I really don't know. So I have the same question.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that politicians work hard. I mean, I think last summer it happened where they passed bills to prevent humanist chaplains in the military or something. And it makes no sense to me why they're going out of their way to give people fewer options, especially when we're talking about like veterans. We're talking about people fighting right now. Like, they're the ones who may need these humanist chaplains, and they don't get them.
I do see issues like PTSD and divorce rates inside the military, and my heart goes out to people who are facing these sort of things. I also think about the children of these families that aren't being discussed. Whenever I read something in a report about here's this PTSD level, or here's this rate of this, or suicide from veterans, and there's at the very end of all of this, I'm thinking, but there's no mention about their children or their family or their neighbors or something. And so, again, I think to myself, what's the problem? Because you can also look to other armed forces that are allies with America, who have prominent members of their chaplaincy who are humanists.
And they don't have a problem with it.
Not at all. And yet, again, I could understand if someone was to say, well, that's our enemy, and we don't want to do something that our enemy is doing. These are actually friendly forces to our country. And
right. There's just no good reason to say no, and yet there's so much resistance to the idea. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So where do you see, what do you hope happens with your chaplaincy skills, and what do you hope you can accomplish with United Corps?
With United Corps, what I'm really looking forward to is to see each individual group, not necessarily independent, but stronger than what they were before. I'm looking for them to have a new sense of direction, a new sense of pride in what they have already accomplished. Because if you look at some of the social aspects, the money that these local coalitions have been raising to give to charity, to find ways of assisting people that are disenfranchised, that needs to be at the focus of the communities, to say, there's loads of bad news out there. There's loads of bad things that we don't want to think about. I would be looking for anybody who is doing the right thing, that is assisting a local community, that's making it a better place to live. That should be the kind of stuff that people just say, yeah, let's talk about that more. So thinking about that and the sort of positive social change that can be generated through the Corps, that's really what I have the base of my hope for. And to use any kind of chaplain skills in the toolkit, as people would refer to it as, or administrative skills, education skills, life skills, anything, I'm freely giving my time as much as I can to support anybody who says we're trying to help make our community a better place to go. And that's what makes me happy at the end of the day, is to hear somebody say, that made a difference, these people had an improvement in their life. I share in that somehow, and I that gives me a lot of hope that humans have the ability to create wondrous things when they put their mind to it.
And do you think we're ever going to see a change with the military anytime soon? Well, in terms of accepting humanist chaplains? Or do you hope that happens?
I would hope so.
I would hope so, too. Cool. Well, if anyone wants to find out about United Corps, the website is unitedcorps.org.
That's right, www.unitedcorps.org. Or also, if you're looking to link up with other secular groups or non-belief groups in your area, we have seculardirectory.org that allows you to check anywhere from 5 to 125 miles radius, because at the end of the day, there's no reason for someone who says, I don't believe in a deity, to feel like they are alone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast for friendlyatheist.com. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant. That's He-Man-T. We appreciate your support.